Welcome everyone to the Academy Fellow Bootcamp session with Dr. Rodman. Sorry, Adam. I am pleased to introduce our speaker for this session tonight. We're very excited for this one. Dr. Rodman graduated with his medical and public health degree from Tulane University School of Medicine and completed his internal medicine residency at Oregon Health and Science University, along with a fellowship in global health at Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center. He is an assistant professor of medicine at Harvard Medical School and helped launch and co-direct the Innovations in Media and Education Delivery, or IMED, initiative at Beth Israel Deaconess, with a focus on digital education and artificial intelligence. Additionally, he is the host of the popular medical podcast Bedside Rounds in partnership with the American College of Physicians. He also recently published a book as of last year entitled Shortcut Medicine, which I just had to add to my reading list. It looks amazing. Dr. Rodman is a leader in transforming medical education and information into the digital space, and we're incredibly excited to have him tonight and lead our discussion and kick off our academic year. So with that, I will turn it over to you and give you screen sharing permission as well.
Oh, why, thank you. That's so kind of you, Callie. And for everybody, this is going to be a really interactive session. It is going to be collaborative knowledge of, because I want everybody to build a working model of digital education to see where everybody's at and to get everybody prepared for what I biased, but I think what you guys are doing is so cool with the CardioNerds. So let's co-create, not really co-creating knowledge, but let's discuss. So, and I'll put up the big thing so I can see everybody's face. So why digital education? The present and future of medical education. So I'm going to just start this off with you guys. I'm going to assume the answer to this is yes. So I just want to hear what, first of all, out of curiosity, you're all much younger than me. So I'm really curious about what digital education resources you're using right now. And every year I do this, every time I do this, I take notes. So I'm going to take notes so we have a list. So go ahead, tell me what you use to learn, what you used in medical school, what you're using in residency. I don't think anyone is a cardiology fellow yet, right? But residency in particular.
I really like EM Crit Care, their podcast, and they're just like all of their website content.
The podcast and the blog, because there's that EMCrit blog as well.
I think YouTube is a good resource as well.
Yeah, tell me more about it. What channels? You said YouTube?
Yeah, YouTube.
Yeah.
I forget what is the exact one, but when I study basic science, there's one called Ninja Nerd, something like that. Yeah, the guy.
What's it called?
About I think it's called Ninja Nerd, if not mistaken. Yeah.
Ninja Nerd?
Yeah.
How did you find it?
It's very good. He's like doing all the whiteboard teaching, and you can like be very specific, try to find a very specific topic that you want to. Yeah.
And what sort of things did you learn from Ninja Nerd in particular? Was you said basic science, so things like pathways or like the Krebs cycle?
Yeah, and physiology, anatomy, things like that.
Okay, what else, guys?
Strong Medicine, also kind of on YouTube, as far as, just really.
You guys like it? You like Eric?
Yeah, I do. I don't know.
He's my friend. I think it's funny when I watch a video of him. I like when he does investigative things. I like when he does the serial version. What else, guys?
I really like
Curbsiders.
Sorry.
Curbsiders. And did Sahi say Curbsiders? Was that you, Sahi?
Yeah, it was me.
I read
the show notes too.
Say that one more time.
I listen to the podcast, but I read their show notes too.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. So you're not only listening to the podcast, you're also using the show notes a lot. Do you prefer one over the other?
I prefer the podcast because I can like listen to it when I'm doing other stuff like cooking or running. But if I like need to solidify like something that I've learned, or like I don't have enough time to like watch that podcast episode again, I just like refer to the notes real quick and I'm like, oh yeah, like this is a study they referenced.
Got it. And Mariana, you were going to say something also, right?
Yeah, I was just saying that I really like Twitter X. I feel like I learn a lot from tutorials, and I feel like every time that a new important paper comes, I heard about it in Twitter. So, yeah.
And how do you consume Twitter? Are you mostly a lurker, or are you engaging in debates about papers?
I am not engaging yet, but I think that's one of my goals.
And do you find papers that you are not aware of? Are these like mostly new papers, things that are being recently released, or discussions about classic papers?
I think about both. So like, when the big conferences are happening and new trials are coming up, I think that's one of the most useful ways to find out what was the big message. But oftentimes like they talk about topics and they just like go through like themes. I really like the I am what's his name that has like all of the like different boxes and differentials. I will look up the name, but yeah, I think both.
Yeah, who else? Tell me else. I have more questions about your Twitter use, or X use. Who else?
Who else I like, or what was the question? Sorry.
Oh, no. I was gonna say say what you were gonna say, Mariana.
No, I thought that you were asking me like who else I liked in Twitter.
Oh,
Sorry,
I
was
meant
confusing
who else
myself.
had resources to give. I'm curious what everyone else says, unless you have other things that you actively use.
I like Life in the Fast Lane.
Yeah. The blog.
Hmm.
And it's FAST, FAST. I'm old enough that I remember when it was just about fat. It's about ultrasound. Anybody else?
So
I
I think
think
I'm one of the few actual cardiology fellows. So like for me, I use a lot of apps like ACC guideline app, ESC guideline app, ASC Echo for like calculating all my measurements and like learning why those measurements are they are and those kind of things.
And these are apps that you're using it on your phone, right? You're pulling it up on your phone.
Oh yeah, like live time as I'm like trying to make clinical decisions, as I'm trying to interpret echoes, those kind of things.
Okay. That's good. So you're the first person to say apps. Okay.
Just mix app.
Al,
Yeah, who said mix
go ahead.
up?
I did.
Georgia, tell me. Yes, I think it does count. Tell me how you use it.
So I think when I was an intern, I was like, oh, I'll do a question block like UWorld. And then I was really humbled and then I shut it down. So now if I have a clinical question, like one of my patients at ITP, let's say, I haven't had a patient with ITP in a long time and maybe even ever. And so I usually use it as a targeted like reference for the text part. And then it links me to questions, but I'm like, I know I'm probably going to get them right now that I read them. And so that I flag them. So when I can do like personalized quizzes now.
So you read in Mixapp the section that you want to learn about first, and then after you've read it, you go to do self-quizzing to check your knowledge.
Yep.
Wonderful. Actually, before anyone says anything else, are there other people who use self-quizzing like Mixapp or UWorld for self-quizzing? Yeah, it's well, actually, do a thumbs up or hands up if you do. I'm very curious how many of you do. Yeah, that's what our research shows. Yeah. So this is digital education also. I think self-quizzing is one of the most common ways that at least Shreya and I have found that people learn. Hey, what else? This is great. What else, guys?
I think
I was just gonna
sorry, go ahead.
I was just briefly gonna add that, I used to think of a lot of digital education being more like core foundational education, but I was surprised to find a lot of like high level, like technical aspects of interventional cardiology, for instance. So a couple of YouTube channels I follow, there's plenty of that on X as well, but it's been great.
Yeah. I would ask what they are, but it would be
Yeah.
actually, since I have you here and you're an old guy like me, did you ever use self-quizzing to teach yourself in residency?
Oh yeah, all the time. I mean, at every level. So Mixapp for sure, the ACC SAP, and ACC also has a CAT SAP. So for every level, I think this really helpful because when you're doing like active retrieval is much better for helping to solidify these concepts.
What else? I don't think we've reached, this is nerdy med ed stuff, but I don't think we've reached saturation yet.
I think stat pearls can be useful. Like when you Google and it comes up with that stat pearl, kind of document.
you're using Google. So you're using Google to access them. Can you give me an example?
Yeah, like if I like the ITP example, if I just Google ITP, one of the first documents that will show up basically regardless of what you Google, if it's medicine based, is stat pearls. And I feel like that has references on there and it does a really good job of just kind of like the very basic like epidemiology, etiology, pathophys.
This is the NIH stat pearls, right?
Mhm.
But you're really using the search engine, right? You're accessing this
Yeah.
via the search engine.
Yeah.
Cool.
Clinical problem solvers too. The podcast and the show notes and all their infographics.
And RLR and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And when you listen to clinical problem solvers, are you listening for fun or are you targeting, oh, not fun, but are you targeting specific knowledge areas?
I'll oftentimes listen to it like as I'm preparing like a lecture as a chief, just to make sure I have that framework fresh in my mind, and like hearing them teach the framework helps me better teach it.
I wonder if anyone will say CardioNerds. Just curious.
I hope so. You guys are famous at Beth Israel. They're under some impression that you guys are celebrities. So if they're like,
Oh my gosh. No, there's some really good CardioNerds at Beth Israel.
yes, there are.
Yeah.
Have we reached saturation? Are there any other big categories of resources so for my own curiosity, does anyone use short form videos like TikTok or Reels for education? Is that something that people do? I see Yang, are you nodding?
Yeah, not really like TikTok per se, but I do realize recently the ORIN podcast, right? They start to make like the YouTube short kind of thing, like 1 to 2 minutes of their whole episodes, and then they just like, who should we refer for AF ablation, this kind of thing, which I find like really useful.
We're making our residents do that now, to do the short video. That's been a Shreya push. They're on TikTok also. I tried to learn how to use I installed it to my phone for several weeks and then deleted it. But does anybody use TikTok for obviously, I'm sure some of you use it for fun, but for educational purposes? No. Okay. How about Instagram? Is anyone using Instagram for educational purposes? Sahi, what are you using it for? You're muted. All right. You're still muted. Do I have the ability to unmute you?
Whoops, I'm sorry, I was muted. But I think it's Cardiology on Call. Like I follow his account, and he often posts stories with like entire cath images, and like I basically like scroll through the story. He often like does it in like question format too. So you can quiz yourself.
Any other big categories that of digital education resources that I'm missing here?
I've asked different AI.
AI.
Yeah, AI. I'd like rate me a mix app question or an ABIM question when I'm bored sometimes. But no,
We're gonna hit the AI elephant in the room at the end. So that'll be it for AI now until we get to the final thing and start to freak out.
I'm not sure if this has been
I was
mentioned,
gonna-
but oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, thanks. I was just going to mention, I like the MGH white book. It's just nice on the ward sometimes when I have a question that I need a concise answer for doing like a workup for, and it's a way that I can kind of search the database, quickly absorb the information that I need in the moment.
And it's called the white book now, right? And is it online? It's not just a physical copy?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's online. I have just searched it on Google and found it.
Cool. I did not know that. Abby, what were you saying?
I was gonna say up to date.
Up to date, yeah. I'm surprised no one said that. Do you guys, I assume, I know what my residents do, so I assume obviously everyone uses up to date for point of care, but I bet most of you use it for learning also, right? Does anybody load up like a digital copy of Harrison's No, yeah, that's what I assumed. Yeah, McGraw-Hill knows that. They're not happy about it. Okay.
Okay, this will sound really bad, but
Yeah.
I still reference first aid sometimes. I'm serious. It has ID pearls. I actually do like Control F in there.
Does anyone use Sketchy or Pathon, like these medical school resources in residency? I honestly don't know. That's still something you guys use? Or Anki Dex? Does anyone use Anki in residency?
I use
Young is nodding.
3.
You do? You too, Georgia?
Yeah, I use it for step 3 exclusively.
Oh, for studying for an exam. Okay. Does anyone use Anki for just routine learning where to reinforce ideas, or is it purely for exam prep? No, okay. Sounds like using it for exams. Have we reached saturation? Is this a pretty good list of the types of resources you use?
Can I add McGraw-Hill on the list? I mean, like, this is I'll say that I've reached for McGraw-Hill and like their panoply of textbooks when I want like to get really good core foundational understanding of a topic, right? Like if I want to understand, like when we were doing CardioNerds, like ACHD episodes, I'm like, man, like what the hell is Fontan? And I want to really understand single ventricular physiology, Fontan palliation. It's really hard to get that from like Twitter. You know what I mean? So I will say that there is still a role for textbooks, but in a digital sense, it's
So you're using digital. So you are using digital textbooks for those sort of foundational references where you don't.
Yeah, if I want to go back and be like, I really need to understand like like the core tenets of this, not just like here's a pearl, here's like a 15-minute thing like this. But I think to understand it's really you still have to go back to something that's more comprehensive.
Well, other than being personally and professionally curious, and I will tell you that when digital education landscape switches all the time, I'm forced to stay young by studying digital education because I am a fuddy-duddy, out-of-touch old man. We have a huge list of things. So I'm going to actually get you guys. So thinking about all of these resources that you use, thinking about yourselves as digital educators, what ties these together? Like, what does it mean to be digital education? And what do you guys associate with? Again, this is open to you guys.
I would say accessibility.
And explain more.
So digital education sources are things that I can get whether I'm at home or board or on a plane. And something I can get daytime or nighttime. So it's not like you missed the noon conference and you didn't get that information. And this information is always readily available for me whenever I'm ready to learn.
So you can use them asynchronously, right? You
Yes.
do not have to be at the same point as the teaching time, and they're accessible everywhere. Perfect. What else?
I also think up-to-date information, looking into old textbooks, things can change. And so I think I expect the information that I'm getting from these digital sources to be the most up-to-date.
Okay, so up-to-date and timely latest evidence.
I would. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Diane.
Go ahead, Claire.
I was going to say like high yield because they don't have a lot of space. And so they're kind of focusing on the really salient parts of a topic.
On the salient. And can you explain just a little? I think I know what you mean by that, but can you explain for a couple more sentences what you mean or give an example?
So I think, like with some of the frameworks, for instance, sometimes they're emphasizing the more like clinically relevant diagnoses that you'll see. And instead of going too much into the weeds in order to kind of maintain the efficacy of the framework and not get it too like convoluted.
Perfect. And then Diane, what were you going to say?
I was actually going to say something very similar, something kind of along the lines of it's information that's very condensed. It seems like it's much more succinct. And it's something that once, like if you go in with a specific topic in mind, you're going to leave having like a good understanding of it, but also usually like a good example of that topic. Because I feel like a lot of them usually kind of highlight examples and that's how you learn from it.
That's good. I might ask you some follow-up questions, but what else do we have? Yeah.
I think like sorry.
Oh,
I
sorry.
think digital education are also very interesting most of the time because people try to reach out to more audience, so there will be more creative, more different kind of design and colors put in rather than the regular textbook that we just line.
Good. That's great. Georgia.
Sure. Yes. I was gonna say that if there is a guide to like next steps of what to do, for example, if you're reading about like ITP or chest pain, having a high yield guide of like what to do and why, like the evidence base for why we run certain labs and kind of the guide of what to do next, and you can kind of check yourself too. Did I think of this? Did I not think of this? I know that's very helpful when I look at the up-to-date website when I'm working.
So telling you like the reasons why we do things, not just providing that information. Perfect.
I would say democratic, or
Yeah.
in that it's appealing to so many different learning types. Like I'm a very visual learner, and that's been like hugely helpful for me, being able to find things that kind of appeal to my learning style.
And different types of learners as well, right? I mean, it's targeting the learners of all different levels. And there are there's obviously language barriers and sociocultural barriers, but it can target anyone anywhere, right?
I think kind of going off of that, it can also like level the playing field for people who are from more generally underserved areas. As far as like, I'm like at a very small community program, and so I don't have a lot of like the wonderful academic teachers that other people have. And so digital education can help me to be able to get to that same kind of level.
And even like when you come to subspecialty training, cardiology is not a good example, but like in ID, even at BI, there's many things we don't have a specialist in, right? So it provides access to subspecialty like knowledge that you might not have at your individual institution, even in places like Harvard.
I think it connects people with like experts. And I just to give an example, I just was learning about IgG4 related disease, and I heard a podcast about like who's writing the guidelines and telling what's the last, research and what they're doing and next steps, which we wouldn't have if that was not an option.
And when you say connect, Mariana, do you mean like you're actually communicating or interacting with these people, or you just have access to them?
I think like access to their like insight of how, they came up with this like new diagnosis. And again, like this physician was just taking care of a patient that they didn't know what they have, and then they came up with the disease like the IgG4 related disease. So I think that's just like, in a way as a learner, that's inspiring, to think about doing different things.
Great, great.
Yeah, I think kind of along those lines, way a lot of medicine's about getting kind of reps and exposure to things. So, through digital education, maybe you never saw a patient with a certain diagnosis, but you've read about it or heard somebody else talk about their clinical workup and management of that. So you've sort of increased your reps and your understanding and like your overall schema for disease by hearing it from somebody else who's formulated in that way.
And it sounds like you're saying specifically targeting self-identified areas of weakness or things that you haven't seen, right? So the self-directed, right? This is your classic self-directed, or be really nerdy, self-regulated education. You are self-identifying your or for like it sounds like also quizzing, right? So the whole kind of self-regulated cycle. Great. Anything else?
I think similar to what Jacob was saying is it kind of helps with spaced repetition. You may not have seen something for a while, and then suddenly you see it. And so it just helps kind of bring it back to your memory, and you refresh your memory quickly. And so it helps kind of prevent you from forgetting it.
Wonderful. I can throw a few things in here based on what you have said. Does anybody have any other characteristics that they want to add?
I was gonna say it oftentimes creates a platform for like peer-to-peer mentorship. I feel like through CardioNerds, we've been able to like grow a community of people who are really passionate about the topic and have been able to help one another in a myriad of different ways.
Well, that is what I was going to add, but community, right? I mean, with many of these digital platforms, the community, whether or not you're a lurker or actively participating, and this is what Mariana was getting to, right? She feels like she's part of the community, even if she's not talking to the expert about IgG4, but she could, and they're speaking to that community. The other thing that I was going to throw, because I heard this from both Natalie and Jacob, is this idea. Actually, it came up a couple things. I think Yang said this also, that people are more creative. Because there's a marketplace of ideas in digital education, right? It's not like noon lecture. No one is forcing you to be there. The more creative, or another way to frame this, is the resources that use more like science-based educational methods tend to rise to the top, right? We all know, I always like to throw this out, the classic medical study that no one learns anything in an hour lecture happened in 1974. How many of you have sat through an hour-long lecture? I'm doing it right now. So, like, we know, and when you hear a lot of podcasts and a lot of the educational resources we use, they're actually taking advantage, whether they know it or not, of these educational principles. So, like adult learning theory. Anything else before I go on? All right, I'll do some bad things and talk for a brief little bit. So one of the principles that I was really happy to hear you say is this idea of of digital education as a community. So social media has gone through let's just say a sea change from when I started working from over a decade ago, right? When I started working on this stuff. So social networks exist. They are often quite terrible, or at least inane. Within those social networks, however, there are virtual communities like the CardioNerds. And the way that I like to frame digital education, and this is not broadly true, you can see there's many different examples, but digital education happens within a specific virtual community. That's what you guys are right now, right? You're a community of learners. That is, for better or worse, what happens on MedTwitter or MedX, whatever we're calling it. It's a community of learners, and the teaching is being made by people in that community for other members of that community. Now, social media or digital education is overwhelming. It is overwhelming to me. This is what it looks like in 2023. I would challenge you to look at these sites and see how many of them you know. If you want to feel even more, this is from Fred Cavaza. He's a French graphic artist, and this is the first one that he did back in 2004. So if you look at this, there's almost no overlap between these. And again, Twitter's there, the original Twitter logo from a long time ago. So it is tough to kind of keep up with how these networks change over time. And if digital education has taught me anything, it's that things are always changing. That being said, and I think everybody knows this, you are all digital educators right now. And what are the main resources? And we actually know this from, well, my research is already out of date, but we know this from the multi-institution study that Trey and I did. Podcasts, Twitter, short form video, infographics, and then up to date. So digital textbooks and self-quizzing are by far and away the most common digital education resources. So if you're just aware of those, you pretty much have like 80% of the field. Elephant in the room, how is AI changing all of this? We're going to get to that by the end, because that is something that in this field everybody is anxious and excited about. And in the year 2024, there is no division. God, this is an annoying background. I'm sorry. I'm just going to move on to that. There's no division between digital education and medical education. Medical education and digital education is part of the foundations of medical education. So this is from internal medicine residents. I should actually just post my own research up here, but this data comports with what Shrey and I have found. Actually, we did our study a couple years after, just 1 year after this, and found even higher uptake. But what they call novel resources, which is very funny because at this point, Twitter had existed for like 20 years. But novel digital resources have similar uptakes to like textbooks, right? These are being used by IM residents at an incredibly high rate. We found actually UpToDate was the most commonly used, and honestly, self-quizzing was the second most commonly used. Something like 80% of IM residents use self-quizzing at least once a week, which I found remarkable. And I was actually quite surprised that it was that high. This is true for attendings as well. As you can imagine, over the last 15 years, residents go on to be fellows and then go on to be attendings and keep the same digital habits that they had when they were residents or even medical students. So this is one of Riddle's papers from 3 years ago, looking at EM attendings. And as you can see, the use of digital resources is much higher than written material or articles, only used by 35%, where attendings are like watching videos. 65% of them watch videos, 50% of them listen to podcasts. So this should not be surprising to any of you, right? Your attendings, especially if they are younger, and younger I'll define as my age. This is how you define. So middle-aged or younger are using the same or similar resources to you. As you know, like the cardio nerds have had, is Ahmed still on, like an amazing impact. I'm shocked at the impact that the cardio nerds have had. This is from a paper that I published with the ACP podcast a few years back. Virtually every single country in the world listens to the ACP podcast. The number of total listens, these are unique listens, was obscenely high. And at the time, it was 20,000 unique listens per episode. I'll tell you, with what our residents do on Core IM now, they're getting between 40 to 60,000 listens in the first 30 days per episode. And if you think about like the impact of you giving a talk at a conference versus, creating one of these digital these digital education products, it is staggering. And then again, we have better ways. There's actually been some better studies looking at CME, but a lot of people claiming CME. So a lot of people listening to these for continuing medical education as well. So back in the early days, when the field was new, there was a lot of excitement about the possibility of exponential growth. This is, I think everybody knows, the emergency medicine, the quick care world were the first. They would say they invented it. I don't actually think they invented it, but they certainly popularized it. And a lot of the first resources were from them. They invented the word FOAM, right? Free open access medical education, which is sometimes still used. So a lot of enthusiasm that this was going to continue exponentially. In fact, what we see, like there's looking like exponential growth. And then what happens? It's going to jump. So nope. So this is where it's at now. So digital education in the year 2024 is a much more mature educational field. It is no longer the Wild West. There are like large podcasts, large conglomerations. CardioNerds is one of them that have really built up community. There are more stable funding models than there have been in the past. And honestly, being a digital educator is increasingly seen as a career, right? As something that probably not what you would do full time, but as something that you can build into part of being a medical educator. This article also is blissfully out of date. It is from 2018. So this is a different era, right? So 2018, this is in Medical Educator. Deb Simpson wrote this about what the role of the medical educator in 2025, that's next year, is going to be. And if you think about digital education, a lot, like she kind of predicted the primacy of medical education. The role of the medical educator is to be a content curator. So rather than knowing everything, knowing where the good resources are, knowing how to provide those resources to your residents, being an early technology adopter, that the attending of the future needs to be fluent in the different technological options out there so as to better support their residents. And then really taking on like this learners, like rather than the know-it-all, a learner-centered navigator and a coach for their residents. So digital education was kind of baked into our future expectations. Now, AI and the rise of AI, I think, has made 2025 look a lot different than we thought. Honestly, Deb wrote this back in 2018, and I think by 2020, especially with the COVID pandemic, this was already true. A lot of technology accelerated a lot of these trends that were happening anyway. But still, it's like our largest, like our medical journals have recognized, and our societies have recognized that digital education is the status quo. I mentioned this earlier. One of the reasons that I think digital education is very cool is that it's, so obviously psychologists do work a lot on social media. They work on it so they can addict us to it. But it turns out that a lot of those properties are really good for education. And a lot of the things that you guys have already identified about what makes resources good, we know are part of the psychology of learning. So we talked about multi-channel inputs, right? There's visuals, there's the show notes, as well as the podcast. There's this ability to go back and review the show notes. It captures your attention. They're fun, they're engaging. It explains complex. Wait, I think this was who mentioned this about the frameworks. It wasn't Diane. Who's it? It was, I don't remember anymore. But whoever listened to CP Solvers, right? CP Solvers takes these complex concepts and makes them better. There are we didn't talk about videos for skills. Ahmed did, but a lot of skill learning. I do a lot of medical procedures, general medical procedures, and I always show videos to my learners to help the application of skills, including after they've done, for example, monopercentesis. And then they're easy to make, right? The barrier to entry, as you guys are learning, is very low, so it encourages innovation. So what makes people choose digital education resources? This is going to be a question for you. Like, how do you know what is good and how do you pick things?
I often feel like if I pick a resource and I'm trying to learn about a specific topic, and then afterwards I know that I could like teach it back to someone, or I'm trying to explain what I just learned to someone and I'm successful, then that's probably a resource that is feeding it in such a way that it is useful.
So if you find success with a resource and you define success by being able to teach it back, then you add that to your repertoire.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what else? How do you guys pick things?
I think it has to fit into my
Clinical decision.
Perfect. Anyone else?
I would say it has to be accurate. Like there are podcasts that I listen to when I want like medical facts, that I want the guidelines, and then there's podcasts that I listen to when I want someone's clinical interpretation of the guidelines, them to challenge the guidelines. But you have to know what you're listening to and what's going to be the correct answer on the board. So basically,
how do you make that judgment?
So it helps when they list like resources. There are things that, like if I'm listening to something that's being put out by ACC, I know that's going to be relevant to ACC. If I'm listening to something like, I'm not insulting him. He's like my favorite person is John Mandrola, but he says straight from the beginning that he gives his opinion of the guideline. And I love listening to him because he does challenge the guidelines, but I do have to recognize that he is the opposition. He's the devil's advocate. Versus when I'm actually sitting for my boards, I need to put whatever ACC tells me.
So what I'm getting from you, what I'm hearing actually is that the source of the information, especially if it's a larger institution, matters depending on the context that you're looking. Okay, I really like that. That's good. Anybody else for how they pick their information?
Free.
If it's free. Yeah. It's free. That's great. Hey, you guys don't have a lot of money. I remember what it's like to be a resident. It's gotten worse. Or a fellow. I was a fellow too. I'm gonna chat. So there's one that I haven't heard that I think is probably like don't you get this from your peers and your attendings? Like don't people share resources? Yeah, and what sort of like how does that go around? You guys should let me know how that works, because again, I'm old and out of touch.
Like I know my residency had this cool thing where they had people generate podcast curriculum to go along with the new conference curriculum. So there was an actual committee that like went and sought podcast resources and created a list of podcast lectures to go along with new conference lectures for people who missed new conference there. Because we at that time we weren't recording new conferences. So it's like, here's a supplement if you had to miss new conference or you're on nights or whatnot. So like we actually had a formal.
Where'd you do residency? That's awesome.
So simply I'm doing fellowship. It's down here at University of Texas Medical Branch in Galveston, Texas.
That's so cool. So there was a committee who was in charge of coming up with a sort of parallel curriculum that would make formal curriculum.
Yeah, I was part of it. That's how I got familiar with CardioNerds, actually. So.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
You should tell them to write that up.
I will work on it. Thank you.
Anybody else?
I personally think it's really challenging to know like which one to choose, because there's a lot of information. So I think they already said this, but when I like a resource, I just try to look on that resource like in a specific podcast channel that I like, and I look in that one first. And if I don't find what I'm looking for, then like look elsewhere.
Yeah, once you found a good resource, you want to stick with that resource, right? There's inertia. You know that you're getting good quality information, like the CardioNerd. Anyone else? So, unsurprisingly, this is basically what the research shows. So all of these things came up. I think one thing that didn't come up is the cognitive load of work, right? There is a lot of like resources that will fit not only in your lifestyle, but in your cognitive bandwidth, right? So the activation energy to learn something is going to be different depending on what's going on in the day, right? So you're relaxing at the gym, you might select a different reference than if you're on the wards, you're getting paged all the time, you need to look something up. So other than that, I mean, this is basically what the research shows, which is that it's pretty complicated, right? It's a complex social network and a lot of learning, I mean, one of the reasons, a good and bad reason that digital education has become so popular is that the clinical learning environment is becoming incredibly stressful, right? There is no time. There's no time for noon conference. You guys are getting paged all the time. There's no time when taking care of patients to sit down and like really read in depth about something. You have a million tasks to do and you're getting epic chat messages all the time. We just went to epic. I'm not very happy about it. So the cognitive load of the clinical learning environment is much more than it was maybe 30 years ago, but our educational system has not caught up, right? You're still required to go to noon conference 5 days a week. If you're lucky enough to be emergency med, it's just 4 days a week, but still. So it's interesting to hear everyone say that. So I want to talk a little bit about what you guys are doing, which is creating digital educators. I'm curious, and this is just open discussion, like what made you guys want to do the CardioNerds? Like what are you guys doing here?
I can start. So I think that this is like the future of medical education, to be honest with you. This is creating more accessibility, it's building it around our schedules the way they exist now. You talk about like moving away from our traditional lecture schedule, but also just like creating lectures that are reaching multiple people so that like it's more standardization of educational standardization of medical education and making these great lecturers and these great topics relevant to everybody and accessible to everybody. When things roll out brand new, we're not waiting for like the new textbook. Like I remember being a resident and like them telling us when we were interns, because Mixed Up like releases a new one, if I remember, like every 3 years. And so them telling us like, don't buy this year's Mixed Up, wait for like next year when they release the new one. Like that's silly. And that's an outdated way of teaching and reaching learners versus something like CardioNerds. It's like, oh, next week, or, even like ACC, like the guideline app, like they release a new guideline that same day, it's available in the application. So much more accessible and up-to-date information, which is what we need these days.
Fantastic. What about other people? What are your motivations?
CardioNerds helped me decide that I wanted to do cardiology. It made me excited about the topic, and I liked the idea of being able to contribute to a platform that like helped me so much in my learning and like career trajectory.
So community, right? You see this as part of your community and you want to give back.
I also think about the future learners, not just in our residencies, but our med students, our undergrad people who maybe aren't even thinking about medicine, and then they stumble across something like CardioNerds and it kind of changes their outlook. And making sure that we consistently produce like reliable and accurate information so that we continue to represent the field and like med ed as a very well.
Fantastic.
Along those lines, I did my medical school in Colombia, so we didn't have a lot of access to up-to-date. You actually had to pay from your pocket if you wanted to have up-to-date. So I think that I want to give back and be able to support on their learning journey in cardiology, especially.
So there's also an equity piece to this, right? You want to give back to people who don't have the same resources that many of us are lucky to have. Anything else before I make everybody really anxious? Okay. So we briefly mentioned that we would end with AI. I think last year I gave this lecture, and this was right after 3.5 had its public release. So we had brief talks about it. It has now been a year and a half since the public release of large language models. So I imagine there's a lot of anxiety about them. And first, I'm just curious, like, have any of you used AI, large language models in particular, in your education, and how have you used it? Yeah, Sung.
And to summarize papers.
So you like upload the PDF and then ask it to summarize it?
No, I just straight up give it the title.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Anyone else? I mean, it's okay if you haven't. I wouldn't be surprised if the majority of you have not used it yet for medical education purposes.
I've asked it to write me questions.
And how is this ChatGPT that you're using?
Yes, that could be.
And multiple choice questions?
Yeah, for some, I never actually told it to do multiple choice, but when I say like a mix-up style or a ABIM style, it is in multiple choice form. It was like, but it wouldn't give me a full quiz. It would just be like one at a time. I haven't tried and I tell it not to give me the answer and stuff, but then I get repeat questions and it's like very similar. So I don't talk about it yet.
Anyone else?
I've asked it to help me make like a 15-minute lecture for the residents. And it's interesting because it will, you give it the topic and then it actually allocates time for the different components of the lecture. And it just provides kind of a helpful framework sometimes.
Okay.
Also how to explain really complex diagnostic topics to patients. So people asking about what goes on in the cath lab, just to try to put patient-centered language in places where it's hard to do. So
I like that. Young, were you gonna say something?
Yeah, I just going to say, because English is not my first language, so I find it very useful in helping me when doing the academic writing. So whenever I write a research paper, I just put in my idea in my own word, in my own way, regardless of the grammar and the structure, and then ChatGPT go to like make it into appropriate. So I think
that's
great.
fantastic. And do you find that it works well?
Yeah, it works. It works really well, but you have to like keep training it so that it can like generate the sentence in the way that you.
Anyone else? I'm curious if Ahmed is using it at all.
I haven't integrated in as much for using it. I've tested a lot. Like, can it create a script for CardioNerds episode? If you were to design a series on cardiac inflammation, what would be the key learning objectives? How would you summarize the article? How would you craft the tweets? I've tested it, and for the most part, been pretty impressed. I feel like Dan has been better about actually using it a lot more fluidly. But it's impressive, especially ChatGPT 4.0. Like the other day, it just in terms of like how quickly this technology is expanding. I had brunch with my friend, and I was like, "You paid for it, right? Dude, I'll Venmo you." So I took a picture of the receipt and I told it that, hey, I had shakshuka and we split the dessert. How much do I owe him, factoring in 15% tip? Just from a picture, it calculated it out for me. I mean, the input so you can give it, it's just like so wild.
Yes, it is. This is just for full disclosure. This is like what most of my research these days is about: is AI and clinical reasoning and scalable oversight in particular. So there are a lot of impacts that it's going to have on medical education that are going to take a few years, I think, to really shake out. But we are on the verge. I think next year it's going to look not that different, except there'll be a bunch of AI tools for ambient listening. But we are on the verge of a sea change in medical education, and I have no idea what it's going to look like, which is ironic because I'm the one at Harvard and BI who's supposed to figure that out. Cool, guys. What questions? This is it. I mean, I have my questions, which aren't helpful to burden you with my questions about the future of digital education. But what questions do you guys have for me?
I think, what do you say to people who are less than thrilled about the idea of like medical education moving to a digital platform, or specifically like older attendings,
I was
maybe?
gonna say, who are these people?
Well,
in the year
obviously not
2024?
cardio nerd, but
No, I mean, it's like
back in
when
my
I
day.
first started doing this, I got skepticism also. I would tell those people, I mean, I'm just gonna be kind of rude here. Like that, when I was a medical student, I remember someone saying, never use up to date. It's the worst thing ever. Like, there are old people who are out of touch. In the year 2024, the majority of IM attendings use digital education for their CME. That if someone tells you that, they just, I don't even know what to say. Like, that's just not the reality. They need to like go outside and talk to some people. Now I think it's another thing when you say like, what part does this have in building an education or a career? What part does this have in getting you potentially promoted? And that is a little more challenging, right? I think there are, and Ahmed can probably speak to this, right? I think getting it to count academically is easier than it once was, but it's still a challenge. Is that your experience as well, Ahmed?
Yeah, I think so. And I think, you know, a lot of programs are incorporating tracks where these things count more, like the, you know, clinician educated tracks and whatnot. I can say for a fact that the job I have right now came directly out of connections I make with CardioNerds. That community part is extremely valuable.
And we
And
have
so
a
there's so
digital
many different
education
elements
track,
of this.
right? And
Yeah.
I'll tell you, our residents are getting fellowships because they were in the DET. People love it. I think that, Callie, your concern is, sure, there's going to be some old out of touch people, but Ahmed, it sounds like same experience for you. Most people are incredibly enthusiastic and excited about it, including in the education leadership.
Yeah, and they're definitely more and more so now than even just like 2 years ago, I'd say.
Yeah. The pandemic, obviously many terrible things in the pandemic, but it really accelerated a lot of these trends and really taught the value. This is why I was really excited hearing about Elizabeth's program with their curated, like a committee to curate podcasts. Like podcasts are increasingly a formal part of curriculums. One of the cool things that NYU does right now with their scalable oversight, they have an AI like read your notes, the students' notes. And then the next day it like populates relevant podcasts that have been curated into their podcast feed. How cool is that?
Yeah, and NYU is doing some amazing things with integrating AI and giving like the feedback on HMP, you know, and things like this is like really, and the AMA, the Sanjay Desai, you know, we had our, he joined our, so we do this once a year, Sanjay Desai lecture, and this last couple of weeks ago, it was about AI, it was Katie Perlacher, David, and Sanjay joined, but like, you know, the conversation kind of went into our precision medicine and utilization of AI and how the AMA is kind of like leading that. It's like really incredible stuff.
Yeah, and NYU is leading the way, but like, what are the resources that they give people? They're digital education resources.
You know, like,
like I think we can, and the AI is really cool, but they're listening to like the CardioNerds. You know, I don't know if you know this, CardioNerds is on their list. They listen to like CardioNerds and Core IM.
That's amazing.
The robots love you guys.
Yeah. Well, Adam, this is amazing. You know, like I always, I feel like every time I hear you speak and you join us, like I learn so much. And so, you know, we'll definitely keep calling you back, you know, routinely. But this is awesome. I love how I mean, this is just a skill in and of itself, like to make an hour-long session so engaging and so interactive. You know, you like pull everybody in, you know, like this itself is a masterclass for everybody listening. Thank you.
Well, you've also, unsurprisingly, the CardioNerds is a great community. You guys have all thought about this a lot already, and the frameworks that you have are going to guide you through the rest of your career. It's self-selection, right? High quality people go into the Cardio. No, it's not like, I mean, hasn't that been your experience, Ahmed? They're like future leaders in the field.
Oh, 100%. And I mean, like it's a special kind of person who applies to something like this, and then it's an even more special person who goes through all the different thresholds. And so, you know, like this group, this is our first, and beyond the initial like graduation from CardioNerds Academy, this is our first time getting together as a group since the year started. So what a way to kick off this exciting year.
You guys are in for an adventure. I've seen what happens to the to our residents who go into CardioNerds. Great thing.
And thank you so much to Callie for putting this one together and organizing it.
Thank you, Callie.
Really quick, take a picture.
Oh yeah, that's right. We're gonna do that.
Yeah, I always forget. So
Good
all right.
job. Are we posing or just looking like educational? Smiling. Okay, I can do that.
Yeah. Filing? Okay. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everybody. And if you ever have any questions or want to reach out, shoot me a message on Twitter or email me the old-fashioned way. Old-fashioned.
Thanks, Adam.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
That was great.
That was so good.
Yeah, I was gonna again, like I haven't seen my kids for like a week, and I was gonna like, transfer the boost to you and then pop off, but it's like I can't get away from Adam. Like this is like so well done.
So engaging. Great.
Yeah, thank you for reading it, Kelly.
Of course. Have a good night. Enjoy your
Have you moved yet, or not yet? It's too early, huh?
No, like 10 days away, and then we.
Okay.
Bye.
Good luck with the move.
Bye.
I know it's a pain, but it'll be so worth it. Have fun, okay?
Bye.
Bye.